Federal Drive is presented by GEHA, Government Employees Health Association, proudly providing health and dental benefits to federal employees and their families. Visit GEHA.com.
Senior executives across government have some new opportunities for development. The Office of Personnel Management has just launched 2 new training series. They'll focus on topics like budget, policy, and human capital management, while also incorporating many of the Trump administration's overhauls to the federal workforce this year. Federal News Network's Drew Friedman got more from OPM Director Scott Kupor.
The reason we designed this new program is the old program was known as FEI, and we made a decision earlier in the year to discontinue that program. The main reason for that was the program was very good. I would say it was lacking in a couple areas. One was just it literally had a physical campus to it, so it required people to be away from office for several days in order to do it, and it was all kind of in-person training. We spent, in the last year, we spent about $22 million in order to get people through that training, and we only got about a third of the SES group through it just because of the cost. Unfortunately, was prohibitive, both in terms of dollars as well as just people's time. The second thing was we felt like the curriculum could use a little bit of an update. And so there's some commonality, obviously, between kind of what we had before and what we have now. But this enables us to do this, number one, at a much lower cost to make it obviously, remote and accessible to people in a self-paced environment. And then importantly, to be able to add some additional areas that we thought kind of the SES team could benefit from.
So you've talked about this being, in your words, high impact, directly relevant training rather than more generalized management training. And you kind of alluded to that in your answer there, but can you talk about what makes this training more specific or more tailored and kind of more of the development of that?
Yeah, we really try to design it with the principle of, okay, like what do we want the SES team to do in their day-to-day management responsibilities? So if you think about that, right, there's some element of, okay, they've got to understand the basic framework of how like the constitutional system works and obviously what the rights and responsibilities are of the executive branch relative to the other branches. 2 is, we want to make sure they had a deep kind of regulatory understanding, again, of kind of how the rulemaking process works, because these things are obviously, an important mechanism by which we can affect policy in the organization. I would say the other big area that we wanted to spend more time on, which was less developed in the last areas, was around kind of people management skills, performance management. I think you and I have talked about this previously, Drew. We have, unfortunately, a culture so far in terms of performance management in the government that has not really done a good job of differentiating true outstanding performance, and then also in many cases, holding accountable people who are not able to do the jobs we need to do. And so we wanted to kind of really give them a refresher and a sense of kind of at least what we expect of senior leaders in the organization. And then the last area, I'll call it leadership for lack of a better word, which is a little bit, obviously can be a soft subject, but there were things like, for example, some sense of kind of financial skills, financial planning, thinking about headcount planning, stuff that, again, is not, through no fault of their own, was never really a core part of kind of what we thought of and what we expected in the SES job. And certainly as, in this administration, as you well know, we think about kind of making efficiency a first-class citizen in government. We wanted to make sure that we also had some training geared towards those elements as well.
So I know that there's also 2 different training programs that you all are rolling out. Can you talk about maybe the difference between them? Is one better suited for certain types of executives, or how should employees be figuring out which is right for them?
I think the best thing to do is obviously people should go through the the actual curriculum that's kind of been published on them so they can understand it. I think they kind of build on one another though, basically. So look, in the perfect world, we would have all SESs, go through both programs, quite frankly. Sometimes that could be just time and cost prohibitive. So we thought we'd at least break it up in a way that was most accessible for the maximum number of people.
And, one of the programs talks in part about, offering some training on President Trump's executive orders and other executive branch priorities. Can you talk a little bit more specifically about what that type of training is going to entail?
The president believes very strongly, as do those of us in the administration, that ultimately, kind of what the president affects through executive orders really reflects, the administration's priorities in terms of policymaking. And so part of what we wanted to do was take people through that process, help them understand it, help them understand how we go from an executive order to the implementation of that order. But some of the things, again, that you and I have talked about, things like merit hiring, for example, is a very important concept in terms of reshaping the federal workforce. And so we want to make sure people understand the principles behind the merit hiring process, again, performance management. So things that basically are kind of within the bailiwick of what we expect managers to do that are now represented in the form of executive orders. We want to make sure people really do understand both the derivation of those as well as kind of how we think about the appropriate implementation of those policies.
Thank you. And then just a question about the actual development of these training programs. You mentioned that the Federal Executive Institute, for example, was taken down earlier this year. I know there was also, OPM previously had a Center for Leadership Development that was partially had a reduction in force occur there. So who was really involved in the development of these products? And, for example, were there contractors involved, or how did this really get up and started?
Yeah, so this was driven mostly internal to OPM, a group called HRS, our Human Resources Services Group, which is, again, where the other leadership development training programs existed. I would say in many respects, we bootstrapped this in the sense that we looked for experts either within government or outside of government that we could bring in. And so as you may have seen, I don't know if you've been through it at all, but a lot of the training is kind of conversations that are happening between people who've led different organizations on different topics, so that it's, again, very kind of hopefully very hands-on, practically oriented, as opposed to some like academic theories of how management should be done. And then the other thing I would just add, just so your viewers have a sense, is look, there's a lot more that can be done, and OPM doesn't have this view that, look, we need to own and develop everything. So I think there are conversations that we're just starting now, but there's plenty of organizations external to OPM who, to the extent they have kind of ways in which they can help us further develop the curriculum, we're very, very open to that. So really the main goals here are making sure the curriculum reflects, again, what we expect of the SES, and then importantly, look, efficiency and making sure people have both the cost is not prohibited as well as people have the time to do things. Those are the main goals. So to the extent third parties can help us do that, we're very, very open to that.
Scott Kupor is Director of the Office of Personnel Management, speaking there with Federal News Network's Drew Friedman. You can find Drew's story and the full interview at federalnewsnetwork.com.